Nicole, and I'm going to be giving you guys a speech today on communication and why eyewitness testimony should not be used in court. So most of you today probably think that you would make a good eyewitness testimony in court. I'm here to tell you right now that you would not. According to the Journal of Forensic Psychiatry, 1/3 of all eyewitness testimony is wrong. Due to various problems in perception, listening, and other bias, eyewitness testimony is unreliable and should not be used as grounds to convict someone alone. Tens of thousands of Americans get falsely imprisoned every year. Imagine if that was your loved one on trial. Let me share with you one of the many reasons eyewitness testimony is unreliable and should not be used in court. So I'm going to tell you why you would not be a reliable eyewitness. According to the APA, which is the American Psychology Association, juries do not understand the many factors that can influence a witness's ability to accurately describe a person or an event. Stress can be a big factor in influencing someone's testimony. So if you're under stress, you've got a bunch of adrenaline pumping, what are you likely to remember? Because in my own personal experiences in life, whenever I'm in a very adrenaline rushing situation, I don't really tend to remember much of what happened. So you got to keep in mind stress, also like the lighting, how much visual interference is there with what you're able to see? What about audio interference? How much can you hear of what's going on? Because what you hear, what's going on, is just as important as what you see. How far are you away? Is it daytime? Is it nighttime? There's just a lot of factors that can influence these things. Another factor that influences a witness's ability is memory. The primary recency effect plays a role in memory. According to the textbook, the primacy effect is our mind's ability to tend to remember things at the beginning of the event as opposed to the middle. Now, this leads to gaps in time within the event, which could be dangerous, because if you're not able to give the full story on trial, you could be leaving out key details that could either convict the murderer, put away someone that needs to go away, or you could convict someone who is innocent and totally destroy their life just based off some false eyewitness testimony. Now, the recency effect is quite like the primacy effect. Now, the recency effect is our ability to tend to remember information at the end of an event. So during that middle portion is that part of the event where we tend to not remember so much, not be able to recall. And then another factor that influences our memory and what we were able to recall is how long from the event actually occurring are you actually going to testify. Because if you're not going to be testifying until 4 or 5 months later, how much of that event are you really going to be able to recall and really accurately portray in court, to come to a verdict? So another example, this would be, for example, if I read to you guys 50 different words, and I had you guys try to recall all the words that you remember. You would tend to remember, for example, the first few words, the beginning of the list of words that are read off, and then towards the end you might remember some of those ending words, but that middle portion is going to be kind of be a little bit blurry. You're not going to be able to remember that area so much because your mind just naturally kind of tosses that information to the side. Now, other individuals can sway our judgment as well. Law enforcement can sway a witness's judgment as well. As an eyewitness, you will likely have to talk, deal, or interact with law enforcement in some way if it is a criminal trial. Just because law enforcement points out a suspect to you doesn't mean they're necessarily guilty. So just because law enforcement may ask you about an individual doesn't mean you should automatically switch to think, okay, maybe this person was the person. You need to remain unbiased as a witness, so that way you're not going to be swayed by law enforcement or maybe a suspect's family or pressure from the public. So you need to be able to remain unbiased and use your own conscious thinking process to formulate an opinion as to what happened. So being an eyewitness is not to be taken lightly, because in the end, it's not your life that's on the line. It's somebody else's. So you need to really make sure that you're doing your job diligently. If you are unsure about information, do not disclose it, and here's why. Our perceptual set is a big factor in influencing eyewitness testimony. The textbook defines perceptual set as our tendency to perceive or notice some aspects of the sensory data and ignore others. So what this means is, for example, if you're walking down the street and you see, for example, a huge fire going on, you're going to tend to remember that a lot easier than you're going to tend to remember the car that just passed you, because that information isn't necessarily important and your mind just disregards it. So if you witness a crime scene, if you witness a murder, how likely are you going to be able to remember everything from the witness? A few minutes ago, my visual aid just came up and walked behind me. Did you guys know it was a visual aid? Probably not. So what were you able to remember? What was she wearing? Did she have jewelry on? Was it, how tall were they? How much do you think they weighed? How much can you remember of that? So that's another thing that can influence your testimonies. You may not even realizing you're witnessing a crime. So how much of that are you really going to be able to recall then on the stand if it wasn't a major event? It was just something that your brain was just going to disregard later. Now, according to Lara Bazelon, a man named Cash Register was 18 years old when he was sentenced to life in prison until new DNA testing exonerated him after spending 34 years in prison. On April 6, 1978, a 70-year-old man was shot dead in a parked car in front of his house. There were several witnesses who were asked by law enforcement to identify the suspect from an array of 6 pictures. All 4 witnesses chose Cash Register's photo, which later led to his conviction at the age of 18 to life in prison. Fast forward 34 years, and Cash Register is now 52 years old. DNA evidence finally exonerates Cash Register 34 years after he was convicted solely based on false eyewitness testimony alone. His entire adulthood and youth was completely stripped from him, completely because of a justice system that failed to provide an accurate way of portraying their evidence by just giving 6 pictures to identify a murderer from, and then also to use that solely as their only evidence to convict someone. This is just one example of the many people that are wrongfully convicted purely based on false eyewitness testimony. According to Samuel Gross of the Washington Post and editor of the National Registry of Exonerations, tens of thousands of people were wrongfully convicted just last year. Now, some of these factors, like we went over earlier, were the set and setting. What are you able to see? What are you able to hear? Who is influencing you? Is the public being a big influence on you? The media? The police? There's a lot of factors that can influence and sway your way of thinking. How much you're able to remember. Does your body, or your mind is going to tend to forget the information that isn't quite as important and only remember the beginning and the end, and not quite remember exactly what went on in the middle. It is impossible to determine the validity of an eyewitness, therefore it should not be used as grounds for any conviction. Now just imagine if that was one of your loved ones on trial, if that was your brother, sister, mother, father, son, daughter, if that was them on trial for murder, and they could go to prison for life in prison, or they could get released, and would you rather have their conviction be determined based off eyewitness testimony alone, or would you rather them be proven guilty and have them give concrete evidence to convict this person? Thank you.
Everybody turn and look at the